good. Good morning. My name is Narayan. I am going to be lecturing to you today about evolution. I am a first-year PhD student, like many of you, in the bio department, unlike many of you. So I guess I'm going to give you a more simplified version of kind of the basic field that I study, maybe not necessarily where you're going to be learning an introductory bio, but it'll hopefully give you a little better understanding for what evolutionary biology really is, and for what I study. So I think a lot of people have varying understandings of what evolution is. You get a lot of noise in the media about, evolution is this anti-God force that's just trying to fill your minds with science and horrible things. But I just want to kind of get a feel for what you guys think. So when I say the word evolution, what do you guys think of?
Progress.
Darwin. Progress, Darwin. Sure. Monkeys. That's a pretty popular one. Anyone else? What do you guys think of when I say evolution?
Change.
Change, yeah. So I think I'm going to start with Darwin. We're going to talk about change, touch on monkeys a little bit. Those are all good starting points. So basic background, we hear about Darwin a lot because he was the person in 1859 who, as some of you in the biology department might know, published what we call The Origin of Species. It was a book that outlined kind of the first proposal for what evolution is. But what a lot of us don't think about is that the full title wasn't The Origin of Species, it was On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. Okay, so what we need to get away from this is that evolution is the theory, natural selection is the mechanism for that theory. So he did three things in The Origin of Species. First, he presented evidence to support the idea of evolution, and he presented this evidence through some natural observations he had made in the Galapagos Islands. He presented the idea of descent with modification, which we're going to talk about, and he proposed a mechanism for evolution, which is called natural selection, which is something that nobody mentioned, but I think it's something we hear a lot about, and that sometimes we confuse with evolution itself. Okay? So when Darwin visited the Galapagos Islands, he saw there were a lot of different finch species. Does everybody know what a finch is? Am I speaking too quickly for anybody? Okay. A finch is a bird, right? It's just a cute little bird. But Darwin noticed that there were many different species of finches on the island. He noticed that there were a lot of different morphs. So there was a lot of variation in the beak morphology of the finches. So some finches had very large, very thick beaks, whereas other finches had very small beaks. And he kind of wondered, as a lot of people have been wondering about other organisms, why that variation existed within the same population, right? So you have like some finches that have large beaks, some finches that have small beaks. He wants to know why. So over time, people had made the observation that after times of drought, finches with much larger beaks tended to survive in the populations. Okay. Does anybody know why? What their guess was? Anybody? Why do you think after a drought, a bird species with a thicker beak might survive?
They're less stuff.
They can eat seeds that are harder because the seeds that were harder could keep water inside of them better, so they didn't die in the drought.
Yeah, so that's exactly the reason why. So what we think today is that after a drought, the only seeds that would be remaining are no longer the little easy-to-eat seeds, but the larger, harder seeds that smaller birds wouldn't be able to process. So that brings us to the idea of natural selection. So natural selection is an editing mechanism. Right, so you have a population of individuals with varying phenotypes, right? So you have a population of individuals and they all have different characteristics. So the exposures of these natural variations to environmental factors will favor some individuals over others, right? So you have the larger beaked individuals being favored over the smaller beaked individuals. And so the evolution of a species depends on their exposure to their environment, right? So you're going to see, in a desert environment, you're going to see evolution of different characteristics compared to like a wet, temperate environment. Does that make sense to everybody? Am I good on time so far? So again, Darwin observed that individuals vary in a population. He also made a second observation that individuals will produce more young than are able to survive. Okay. And the second point is very important. Individuals will vary in their degree of reproductive success, right? So some individuals will produce more offspring, others will produce fewer. And only a certain number of offspring can survive in the next generation. Does that make sense? So individuals will differ in their likelihood of surviving and reproducing. So some individuals, as we talked about again and again, are better fitted to survive certain environments compared to other individuals. And so the idea of natural selection is that the individuals who survive, who possess the traits that are favorable in that environment, will survive to reproduce and create the next generation. So you're going to have, over time, a changing in phenotypes or characteristics that lead to what appears to be a change in your population. Does that make sense? So if you have a lot of years of really good climate on these islands, if you have a lot of really easy to eat seeds, a lot of easily accessible food, you're going to have relatively smaller beaked individuals. But after a drought hits, you might expect that the population dynamics will shift into one that favors larger beaked individuals, which is what Darwin might have saw when he visited the islands. Does that make sense? Am I still going okay speed? I feel like I speed up a little bit. Is that all right? Okay. So, let's see. Okay, so let's do that one. One part off. That's okay. So let's say we have a population of beetles. These little circles are going to be little beetles. Okay. All right, and these beetles live in an area of green vegetation. Okay. Some of the beetles are white. Some of the beetles are green. You guys know the basics of like Mendelian genetics, right? So we're going to have a very, very simplified model, okay? So anyways, we have variation of population. We have different beetles of different colors. Some are white and some are green. So which beetles might you expect to survive in a usually green environment? Green, right? We don't know anything about these beetles, right? So they could be predators, they could be prey. In many cases, they're both, right? So, but we might imagine that it could behoove them to be green, because if you're a predator, it's nice to blend in with your background, so you can hunt better. And if you're prey, it's also nice to blend in, so you can hide from your natural enemies, right? So let's say there's a drought, and this green area turns white, because we know plants turn white after a drought. Your background turns white. So what do you think will happen to a lot of the green individuals? They might die, right? Based on our extremely simplified model, you might expect that a lot of the green individuals will die because they can no longer camouflage with their environments. They can't hunt, they can't hide from predators, right? So we might lose a lot of the green individuals. Let's pretend we have no white ones. So we might lose a lot of green individuals, and we might also lose a couple white ones because they might die from the as well. So what could happen after this drought is that you would have a couple more white individuals compared to the green individuals, right? So the proportion of white individuals in the population increases. Does that make sense? Just due to death, right? So then, in the next generation, what might you expect about the proportion of white to green, or the ratio of white to green individuals in the population? Would it be larger or smaller than this population? Could be larger, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe the white individuals are better suited to living in a white environment compared to the green individuals. And so that's kind of the mechanism by which natural selection works. But the thing to remember is that natural selection is totally dependent on the environment, and environments are dynamic, right? So they're constantly changing. You have seasonal variations, you have year-to-year variation. So what might be a good environment for a certain type of organism, say a green individual in 1 year, might not be good for that same individual in another year, right? And that's why populations are constantly evolving. That's why you don't have a stopping point, because the environment is constantly evolving. So what is the best environment for you might not be the best environment for you the next year. Does that make sense? Okay, and that's all I have for all of you today. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Narayan?
Yep.
I could tell you were nervous in the beginning with your hands.
Okay.
Just listen up. Remember that you know more about the subject than anyone else in the audience, so be confident in your own abilities and knowledge. And stop asking, does it make sense so often?
Oh, I did that a lot.
A lot.
Okay.
It's very, it's nice to ask, is everyone following me?
Yeah.
Make sure that everyone's engaged, but maybe not so often. All
Okay.
the time I go into
All right. I think I asked you about my speed a little bit too much, because I was like I'd find myself, partway through wondering if I was speeding up too much, but I hope that wasn't too much of an issue.
Don't worry about it. Just don't be insecure.
Okay.
I'll be more confident.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll try to take that to heart. Does anybody else have any questions about what we just talked about?
Or comments?
Like-
Anything at all?
Any suggestions do you guys have? I really appreciate those. Yep.
My parents told me not to believe in evolution because it's just a theory.
Okay. Oh,
How do you
you want
say
me to
that?
address that? Well, I mean, so we throw around the word, so the word theory kind of has two definitions, right? There's the one that's in the popular lexicon, which is whenever someone says something like, I don't know, like if someone says, oh, the sky is blue because, I don't know, because the ocean is blue. Like I heard this on the show Arthur. So because the ocean is blue and it reflects on the sky and that makes it blue, right? Which we know is ridiculous. And then someone says, oh, that's just a theory, right? So a lot of people think the word theory means a conjecture or an idea that isn't supported by facts. But what is true in the scientific community is that a theory is quite the opposite. So a theory is usually a pretty firmly established idea that has a lot of evidence. I mean, gravity is just a theory, right? But nobody tests the theory of gravity by walking off a building every day. It's just because, I mean, I think evolution is a little bit harder to, it's not quite as tangible. I mean, you can experiment on it, you can test it, but you don't really encounter its implications every day. And so that's why, that's kind of about the word theory. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great.
How come Republicans don't believe in natural selection in science, but they believe about it in in the business world, survival of the fittest, shouldn't bail anybody out?
Yeah, so I think people throw around the word Darwinism a lot. So Darwinism is kind of a dirty word. So it's the misappropriation of the word evolution to further, some not so nice theories. So I think the idea of eugenics, everybody knows about like the Nazis. So that's kind of their idea. It was kind of a corruption of the word evolution. And so that's what I was trying to get at today. So when people talk about evolution, well, when they talk about Darwinism, they have the idea that there's, a superior status, right? That there's a certain type of people that is the best to have. And they think, well, because, natural selection is always improving a population, that there is some end goal that we should aspire to be, which is ridiculous because as we talked about, natural selection is context dependent. It's dependent on the current environment. So the population that exists now is merely a reflection of the environmental conditions of the generation before us. And as we've talked about, those are constantly changing. So, I mean, in a dynamic society, the needs of the population will be constantly changing. And so I think it's ridiculous to assume that there is some kind of, best human being. So, did that help? Yeah. Anyone else?
All right, thanks, Ryan.
Okay, thank you.